Alara was a creature of the shadows, born in the damp, stone corridors of the servants' quarters. Her father, Alistair, the royal groundskeeper, had taught her the first rule of survival in the palace: be unseen, so she learned to blend with the earth, her hands perpetually stained with soil and rose oil, content to live and die unnoticed. But that fragile peace shattered the day King Theron, the Iron King, saw her. He wasn't looking for anyone. He was pacing the high battlements, the weight of his crown and the burden of treaties pressing down on him. Then his gaze fell to the courtyard below. In the central garden, a girl was pruning the white roses, the very ones his late mother had planted. She was humming a quiet, simple tune, a melody that somehow sliced through the sharp, biting wind and reached him. He stopped, he watched. Down in the garden, Alara felt the stare before she saw it. It was a physical weight, like a hand pressing firmly between her shoulders. She looked up, her heart lurching, and her eyes met the king's. He was just a silhouette against the grim, grey sky, but she felt the intensity of his gaze burn her skin. Instinct took over. She dropped into a low, trembling curtsy, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. When she dared to peek up again, he was gone. But the feeling of his eyes on her remained, a brand she couldn't wipe away. That very night, a royal decree arrived. The garden maintenance schedule was to be changed immediately. Alara was now required to tend the white roses at dusk, the precise time the king took his solitary evening walk. The news terrified her father. "Be soil, Alara," Alistair whispered, his own hands, usually so steady, shaking as he gripped her shoulders. "Be stone. Give him nothing to see. A king's interest is not a blessing, it is a brand." But King Theron didn't want her to be stone. The first evening, as the air grew thick with the heavy scent of night-blooming jasmine, he approached. "You do not wear gloves," he observed, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. Alara froze, her pruning shears clutched tightly in her hand. She kept her eyes downcast. "The thorns. They teach the hands to be careful, Your Majesty." He stepped closer, so close she could smell the leather of his clothes and the cold night air clinging to him. He didn't look at her face, he looked down at her hands, raw and caked with dirt. "And what have they taught you?" he asked, his voice soft, almost curious. She swallowed hard, her own voice barely a whisper. "That beauty and pain often grow on the same stem." A slow, unsettling smile touched his lips. He was becoming obsessed, she realized, but not with her face or her form. In a court filled with painted masks and practiced smiles, she was raw, real, and most dangerously genuinely afraid of him. He was obsessed with her lack of artifice. The suspense in the castle grew into a choking fog. The court began to whisper. The king's strange fascination was a violation of the natural order. He started requesting her presence for the most trivial things. He demanded she, a simple gardener, arrange the flowers in his private study sanctuary. Not even the queen was permitted to enter freely. The queen, a woman of cold porcelain and quiet power, watched it all unfold with a venomous neutrality in her eyes. Alara was trapped, a mouse brought to a lion's den not to be eaten, but to be studied. Her life was no longer her own. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. Courtiers would fall silent as she passed, their eyes following her with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. She was the king's shadow, a ghost haunting the palace halls, summoned and dismissed at his whim. The roses she tended became her only solace and her gilded cage. Their beauty was a constant reminder of the day her life changed, and their thorns were a mirror of the sharp, constant anxiety that pricked at her heart. One night, a royal guard appeared at her door. She was to be brought to the high tower immediately. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs as she followed him up the winding stone steps. She walked in, expecting to find vases waiting to be filled, but the room was empty, save for two things, the king and a single, large object shrouded in a velvet cloth. "They tell me I am harsh," Theron said, his voice echoing in the sparse room. He began to circle her, his steps slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. "That my kingdom is built on fear. But you are the only one who doesn't lie to me with your eyes. Your fear is honest." He stopped in front of the covered object and, with a swift motion, pulled the sheet away. It was a magnificent, life-sized portrait. A painting of a woman with wild, untamed hair and a defiant chin, her eyes seeming to hold a fire within them. A woman who looked strikingly, unnervingly like Alara. "My grandmother," Theron said, his voice softening, "a commoner, a gardener's daughter. They say she drove my grandfather mad with her simplicity." He reached out, not to touch Alara, but to trace the painted cheek of the portrait with a strange reverence the court tried to erase. They whispered that her blood was too thin for the throne. They were wrong. He turned back to Alara, and his eyes were burning with a terrifying, proprietary light. In that moment, she understood. He didn't see a servant. He saw a second chance. He saw history repeating itself, but this time he would control the narrative. "They think I am obsessed with you," he whispered, the sound dark and possessive as he closed the distance between them. "I am obsessed with truth." He lifted her chin with one finger, forcing her to meet his gaze. The touch was light, but it held the weight of his entire kingdom. Alara wasn't just a servant's daughter anymore. She was a reflection, a prophecy, and the singular, all-consuming focus of a man who broke everything he ever tried to hold. The roses she tended had thorns, she knew, but she now realized that none were as sharp or as inescapable as the king's suffocating need. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video.